Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name is Renee Lavallee Mckenna, and I'm here today with Rachel Mann, PhD, also a shamanic healer and spiritual teacher like myself. She's also a sacred activist and social scientist. And we're going to talk today about the shamanic approach to healing trauma. Rachel, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Renee. I'm so honored to be here. It's a pleasure. Absolutely.
So we had a little chat before we started, and you mentioned the 4 floors of trauma healing. And so let's start with that. That sounds really interesting and exciting.
Okay. Well, so over the 17 years that I have been in practice, and with the 2,000 plus clients that I've worked with, I have developed in my own mind a basic kind of rubric about where people are in their trauma healing journey. It's also based very much on my own trauma healing journey. And in a way, I don't want to say that it's exactly stages, because nothing, of course, is linear. There's always ways in which we can, move through a particular issue in our life, and then we're working on another one. The 4 floors, the first floor is basically where perhaps you're really caught in trauma feedback loops, triggered with a lot of perhaps somato-emotional kind of sensations, feelings, that some things that you may not even know what they are.
Right, like panic and anxiety and
depression, exactly.
Yeah.
And perhaps then you wake up to the fact that, my God, I need help, right? I need help with this. So, and I talk about how at each floor there's a particular kind of medicine that I apply in terms of shamanic energy medicine and other tools. And so often people at this level are very dissociated. Now, in a psychological sense, dissociation is talked about in a sense being separate from self, not being connected to self. In terms of the energy body, it literally means that the energy body, or the light body, that is this beautiful luminous egg that surrounds and interpenetrates into the central channel, is actually knocked off center or is completely disconnected, except by thin filaments of energy cords. And this can lead to all kinds of, difficult, crazy physical symptoms, mental, emotional symptoms, as well as also, energetic phenomenon. And so at that level, what I'm working on is helping a person begin to create a sense of safety, because in trauma, one of the first things that goes when there's some kind of traumatic experience is a sense of safety. And also perhaps even your resilience, your natural resilience goes, right? And it can also open up a lot of sensitivity to picking up other people's energies, sort of willy-nilly. Right. And I just listened to your podcast about that, which was very interesting to hear. So that's really the first floor. So what I'm doing is,
I'm going to jump in too.
I want you to jump in.
So it's interesting. I think we'll see if we have a slightly different paradigm. And I'll be curious. So my question to you will be, how do you create safety? And I'll talk about how I create safety.
Absolutely.
So
great.
So, because you're right, that sense of safety and being able to ground and find something that is trustworthy, particularly.
And sometimes even your body is not trustworthy.
No, exactly. I mean, it's one of the things about trauma is that we don't have control over what's happening, and we lose a sense of trust within ourselves, within our own body.
Yeah.
And so for me, the key is to connect people with that which is trustworthy, which is the larger consciousness system, nature spirits, or God of their own understanding, whatever your paradigm, your own higher self, whatever that paradigm is, using the principles of the shamanic journey, although I don't always teach people the direct shamanic journey. I use a modified version of it, which is kind of informed by hypnotherapy, which leads to exactly the same place. It's just a slightly different path to get there. Generally to what's called in shamanism, the lower world, and connecting very directly with the spirit of nature and having people connect with the elements that we're all connected with. We're all held to the earth by gravity. We all have water flowing through every cell of our body. We breathe the air in and out. We receive the sunlight. So that experience of visceral, energetic, spiritual connection in itself is often profoundly healing and transformative for people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly it. I mean, at this point, basically the basic work is to feel that connection. And in my work, it's really about feeling the connection to Mother Earth and the nourishment that she can bring us. And actually, I have a very basic practice where a person can lie down on the ground and visualize the earth sending this beautiful mother's milk up into their body, up into them, which soothes the nervous system. Or I give them a very basic practice of visualizing themselves inside a beautiful clear quartz crystal. Because that practice actually kind of upshifts their vibration, and it also provides protection. And like you, I also use something, although I'm not trained in hypnotherapy. I've done a lot of hypnotherapy for myself, with practitioners. And yes, you're absolutely right. Like journeying in hypnotherapy, they're really like this. It's just you're getting to the same place in a different way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You want to take a bike, you want to take a bus, you want to walk.
You want to rattle, or you want to do, just a visualization. Yeah. And I do the same thing so that then they can begin to, in my case, I'll have them visualize almost like a stage. And on that stage, we'll call in who, what kind of angelic beings are going to come in? What does the spirit of Mother Earth look like to you? Where is that, what, connecting with that luminosity. And then in terms of the energy medicine, I would be clearing heavy energies from the light body and cleansing and cleaning the chakras. Because a lot of this disturbance, somatic disturbance, emotional disturbances, anxiety, depression, it appears in the energy body, on the surface of the energy body, like fog or fire, or, just impacted energy like tar. And so often just doing that kind of clearing will already begin to uplift the energy of the person. So they have a little bit of relief. They begin to feel like, oh, wow, I can look around. Yeah.
So I generally have the elements of nature do that clearing for the client in the space that they discover or travel to, with following their own intuition or active imagination or transpersonal awareness, however you want to understand that. That we all have access to the larger system, however it conceptualizes itself in our own body mind configuration. And so I usually have people tend to be drawn to different elements. Some people are more comfortable with water, some with fire or earth or sun or air. And so I'll usually let their own natural tendency or preference draw them to it. Again, all the elements are filled with wisdom and alchemical brilliance
absolutely
to transform. And so I'll usually have the client ask, is there anything that wants to be released or received from this element, and how does it present itself? So I'm not doing the work necessarily, but it's the same. I love to see how practitioners work in slightly different ways, right?
Well, what you're reminding me of is something a friend and colleague who's also an energy healer that we talked about years and years and years ago, that she was told by one teacher, indigenous teacher, that there are fire shamans and there are water shamans. Okay. And the definition that she gave was that water shamans take the client through their own process, right? And that shaman is holding that space. And a fire shaman is running that process through their own system, right? And doing it on behalf of the client. So one of the things before when we were talking was, that why I decided to expand my practice from doing single energy healing sessions into a mentoring program is that I can use both things, just like you do, helping the client, find their own way, find their own connection to earth and angelic guides and ancestral support and animal allies, as well as then combining it with when I'm doing the work for them. Yeah. So
Beautiful.
yeah. Do you have a particular, have you done energy healing for yourself or others where you're actually doing clearing and that kind of thing?
I have, and I have the training to do it, but it's not my preferential way to work. I feel like at this point, and in my mentorship program, we have a little bit of a different usage of the word mentorship. So Rachel's is one-on-one, working in 9 sessions you said, with people, right? And so my mentorship program is a year-long program of people that are looking to see how they can best be of service in the world and be formed by this work. They may be practitioners, they may be budding practitioners, or they may be corporate people that just need to level up and incorporate really grounded spirituality into their work. But to answer your question, so I train my mentees in traditional shamanic methods. I have been trained in traditional shamanic methods, but where I'm interested in and where I feel like we're at evolutionarily as a species is that for many people, the need for an intercessor has become superfluous, or it's actually a hindrance. And that for people that are seeking a more direct connection with the divine that doesn't have a doctor or a Bible or an imam in between them, we can access it directly ourselves. So I like to say, I teach people to be their own shaman. So I teach them, I walk them through, of course, very safely and usually gently, the process that I could do for them, but it's really about incorporating their intellect, their own consciousness, and it's paradigm shifting. This work is paradigm shifting for people that observe what it is that's happening rather than just having it done to them. It may have the same effect, but I think there's an exponential benefit when people intellectually understand, because I'm like an evolution pusher. I'm like, we're growing here. That's why we're here in the third density of Middle Earth. So that's my approach. I will pull out my drum and do a journey for a person if they're depleted, but generally those people don't come to me anymore. I have to say, that's not the people that are coming to me. And now I send them to my mentees, actually.
Well, what you're noticing, I definitely have noticed a shift. And I agree with you that there's a need for people to be empowered to make the connection themselves. Which again is why I started offering this one-on-one mentoring program, because I wanted to be able to do both things, because the energy medicine, is extremely powerful. But when we do the energy medicine sessions, it's like there's been a whole process beforehand where the client and I are working together, and I'm I'm leading them on shamanic journey. I'm leading them on their own shamanic journeys, doing something I call psychopomp, which is similar to hypnotherapy. And also, giving them visualizations and meditations to do, and we'll do them together. So, and sometimes just processing, storytelling, processing, and then what happens is then the energy medicine session is like a growth. It grows out of a collaboration. Right. Of, okay, now let's really hit it with the energy medicine.
Right.
Yeah.
Bringing what's happening in this field and having good congruence with both.
Exactly. So
I want to talk a little bit about my perspective on trauma, because I'm interested in the offset egg energy formation. That's a different perspective from mine. So the way that I understand trauma, which is really informed by shamanic soul retrieval, which has its counterpart in Western psychology with inner child work, and very popularized now internal family systems, which is just brilliant. They have kind of blended. He's right. IFS, internal family systems, is right on the edge as far, I think, as Western traditional psychology can be of the spiritual realm.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Oh, it's a really wonderful modality. Anyway, so my experience with trauma is that it's when an incoming experience is too much to handle and the psyche goes into 911 mode, very much like a breaker switch on a house, where if there's a surge of energy, the breaker switch or the fuse will blow so that the house doesn't burn down. And part of the electricity of the house will shut down, so to protect the house. And I think our
great
psyche,
analogy. Yeah,
our psyche does that so we don't go crazy, right? And it's about, we're going to focus on fight, flee, or hide, survive in the moment, and we'll deal with the emotional wreckage later. And what the fuse blowing or breaker flipping is about is that there's a part of the self that actually absorbs the traumatic event and gets frozen in psychological or historic time, what is called in shamanism is non-ordinary reality, or what Jungians would call the transpersonal realms, and stays frozen there in time and space.
It's a brilliant description.
And the work, and then the bad news is that we don't recognize this in our culture, and many indigenous cultures do recognize this and have many traditions of ceremonies and medicine and sweat lodges where people have these opportunities to reorganize themselves, but we don't do it. We don't realize that that's what's happened. And so we go on, and a lot of the presenting issues that you so clearly described, known as PTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, like anxiety, depression, intrusive dreams, panic attacks, those are, from my perspective, from a shamanic perspective, actually this disconnected or shattered parts of the self that are trying to get back in. And we don't know how to let them back in. And a lot of times we're even blocking them because we think we might need to re-experience the trauma, or we're just trying to get on with our life. And the work of soul retrieval is to using these intuitive or non-rational tools, not irrational, non-rational.
No, I'm following you.
Right. I'm saying that for the viewers. I know you know it. Tools of what I call spiritual psychology to travel across non-ordinary reality, or take the personal into the transpersonal and reconnect with these disassociated, lost parts of ourselves and bring them back. So that's what trauma healing is. That's what soul retrieval is, from my perspective. And can you say more about this off-kilter egg? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. So, in a healthy, energetic, physical ecosystem, right? I mean, it's often called the aura, right? So it is this egg-shaped, usually luminous, light-filled, color-filled.
Would you call that the energy body, or is that something different?
It's the energy body.
Okay.
So it can be called the energy body, the aura. It can be called the light body. My teacher Alberto called it the light body, right? And so that light body is like the energetic matrix that actually is the pathway for our connection in the physical garment to our higher self or our soul. Right? And the energy body will, in many ways, reflect whatever the inner struggle is or the outer challenges are. Okay? So, for instance, the energy body can get torn. So, like, for instance, if somebody actually gets stabbed, okay, you will see the tear in the energy body that's above the point of the wound.
Okay.
And so sometimes if somebody gets stabbed and then, you know, that wound heals over, it's like there's a pucker in the energy body. The other thing about the energy body is that we have energy cords. Now, again, in a healthy ecosystem, in relationships with others, we would have a cord heart to heart, right? And depending upon how intimate the relationship is, there could be like a cording from, you know, the first temple, as it's called in the Karo medicine tradition, which I'm trained, which is the first and second chakras and so on. And then you have a cord mind to mind. But what happens when we have relationships that are maybe impaired or abusive or out of balance, we might have somebody might be corded into us, like in our side here. And there's either they're taking our energy or we're taking their energy, or in some way there's a feedback loop that is not in service.
Right.
So the energy body is this ecosystem. And like, for instance, if we are very anxious all the time, I will always remember I was doing an energy clearing for my dad many, many years ago. He's now deceased. And I think my father lived with a lot of anxiety. And the very first energy healing I did for him, which was quite precious, you know, was I reached into his energy field, and it was like all this fear had become, you know, like when our windshield gets struck and then it shows up as these little crystals,
Right.
you know, that's what his energy field, his luminous body felt like, his light body. It was filled with these, because what happened over time is that all that fear and anxiety began to harden.
It crystallized. Right.
Yeah. So, and so yes, the light body, is a big and important piece in terms of healing trauma in my practice.
Okay.
Because what can happen then is that the energy body can get very contracted in, right? Which can actually feel like you can almost feel dead. Or the energy body. So again, let's use the analogy of a car accident. So let's say, you know, you're in a car accident, right? And you get knocked, like let's say you get hit from behind and your body goes like this, right? Okay. The energy body can literally get separated from the physical garment. Yeah.
Okay.
And the so that's what an energy body dissociative process is like.
Interesting. We'll have to talk more. We'll talk more. We'll talk shop offline about that.
I wanted to, there was something though that you said, Renee, that was stimulating something in me. Yes, soul retrieval. Okay. I do soul retrievals as well. And the soul retrieval could be archetypal beings. Soul retrieval in the shamanic sense, as I've been trained, can mean everything from powerful cosmic beings of light, positive ancestral spirits. Soul retrieval could be qualities, even qualities, positive qualities. Those are
Interesting.
also soul gifts. But in my practice, we don't do soul retrievals until we've done a wound extraction.
Is that the second floor?
Yes, the second floor is the wound extraction.
Okay, speak about that.
Very good. Good guess. So what happens is that once there's enough of a sense of safety, which is, as we've already discussed, then, and the energy body has been cleared out, and whatever shows up is ready to be cleared out, which also means that the energy body is expanding out. Then what I do is I can then journey and I can go into the lower world, just like you were describing, and find what I call the constellated matrix of the wound that is causing the disturbance, right, in the psyche, in the psychology, in the mind body soul complex. And I can find that wound, and then with a clear Vogel crystal, 12-sided cut Vogel crystal, twirling it over the solar plexus, I can actually extract that constellated energy out of the psyche, out of the energy body, out of the subconscious. And then what happens is kind of like when you remove a tumor in the physical garment, in the body, there's like a hole, right, at first, right, an opening. And actually that constellated energy has, in its own way, because the ego and the energy body have adapted to that wound, right?
Right.
Okay. And so when you remove it, you also have to then bring something in to begin to heal it, heal where you've taken that wound out, and also to bring back in whatever, I call it, medicine is needed. Now, this could be like a child part of self that disappeared, right? Got dissociated. So that child part could be the spontaneous child. It could be the
curious or playful child,
the curious, or the, so this is where the inner child work can come in. But it can also be, as I said, there can also be archetypal energies that come in to begin to heal that space and bring everything back into balance. So it may take several of wound extractions and several different soul retrievals in order to begin to get to the child part that's been lost. Yeah.
So I love this. This is so fun. So the way that I get there is, so that's a fairly traditional shamanic method. Yes,
very traditional.
And which is beautiful and ancient and very effective, right? So the way that I get there is to go through the body. And, there's a very popular book right now, The Body Keeps the Score, which I've listened to a little bit of. And so I go in through the body sensation that the person is usually coming in with some kind of suffering. I mean, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm whatever those are the two big ones, self-hatred, like whatever the presenting issue is that's causing the person suffering. And so we go into that constellation in the body right there and give it some form. Does it have a shape? Does it have a density? Does it have a color? Does it have a sound? And then there's two places we can go. My favorite place now, so the first place, that's the more simple version of soul retrieval, is to ask, and often these people already have guides and teachers that we have done that preliminary work. They're connected with a spirit guide in animal form or a spirit guide in human form, or maybe both, with an element of nature, with a religious or wise being. Many people work with Jesus and Mary, or Radha and Krishna, or, however, whatever shows up for them. And so tree and bear and all these, so
Yeah.
they have wisdom and grounding in higher consciousness already. And so we ask to be shown, when was the very first time you experienced this particular energetic configuration, whether it's in your belly or your chest or your throat or your head. And in always some kind of an image or an intuition will come up. Doesn't have to feel related, and we can go to that place. That's the place of this particular trauma or separation. And there's a whole series of things that we do, eventually bringing that part back, and that part fits back into this place, usually perfectly. And it's in my work, always an aspect of their authentic self that's been disconnected. And when we bring it back, we bring back all of the things that are good. Again, we go back to the electric and breaker fuse kind of metaphor that, you know, the lights might be shut off and you don't have access to the microwave because the breaker fuse blew, but it doesn't mean they're broken. And so we lose access to these curious, playful, adventurous, sensitive, intuitive, loving, whatever they are, kind of parts of ourselves, and we can return them when we become more whole. So that's kind of the simple version of soul retrieval. The more complex, and my favorite, now this is what I usually do, and my sessions are 90 minutes because it has to make room for this.
Yeah, me too.
Is to incorporate what Lama Tsultrim Leone, a very brilliant Tibetan Buddhist Lama in Colorado, has popularized as feeding your demons, which is an ancient Tibetan shamanism. Tibetan Buddhism is very shamanic.
Yep. Sure
and so they do a lot of negative energy extraction and transformation. And so the modality of choice for me is to find this, like, so the anxiety's in my chest, it feels like a black gooey ball. Okay, whatever, fine. So we move that black gooey ball out of their body. And I've come to understand that now as a defensive structure or lower energy that has come because nature abhors a vacuum, to fill in that place where their authentic self should be, right?
Right, exactly.
And we allow it to take form. And this is usually a dysfunctional protective mechanism. Anxiety and depression, even suicidality, if we look deeply at it, they are usually misguided attempts to keep the self safe. Even if it's unto their death. I will keep you safe even if you kill yourself. So it's and so we get some information about this energy, however you understand it. Now, in Western psychology, we would call it a defensive structure. In shamanism, we would call it energetic interference or demonic possession or an entity. I mean, there's a lot of different ways.
I use the word entity.
Entity, right. So then once that is, we understand kind of what the deepest need is underlying this energy. Then we go to, when was the first time you experienced this energy? And we get the disassociated or the separated or the shattered self part. And we bring them into a safe and sacred place to connect them with the guides and teachers, this disassociated self part, which is tremendously healing for them to, and often there's a whole respite and healing and emergency room thing that happens with them. And then we feed this defensive structure or entity its most deepest needs, and it either dissolves or transforms, and it either goes away or it becomes the aspect of higher consciousness that you are talking about getting. With whether it's a guide or a teacher, an aspect of their higher self, or an element or a crystal or a light or a color or a butterfly or a whatever it is. And then we bring the soul part back of, usually again, from my modality, that's an aspect of their authentic self. Always a younger part, even if it's not a child, because this is happening in history. And then they automatically have this connection, and we do a transmission from this either transformed defensive structure or from the now higher level entity being connection with higher consciousness
exactly.
that's now here to provide a new configuration
Yeah,
for protection with this now reintegrated self part.
yeah, I do a similar thing. It kind of depends upon the client and what's up, but you know, I will often, before I even do any energy work, I will have them do that connection. Let's connect. Where do you feel it in your body? And the similar kind of thing. The other interesting thing is that we often negotiate. I negotiate with these entities, these defensive, these protectors, as I'll call them, right? Because sometimes you need to negotiate with them, right? You need
I'm not very good at negotiating. That's what internal family systems does, negotiate with the protectors.
right.
And I'm not,
You're more like,
I have a different approach, but you can tell. I'm more like, if the I always ask the clients, is this something that you want to keep that feeds on your on your life energy?
Right.
If they say no, you gotta go. You either gotta clean up your act or you gotta go and be, I like to call it an inner, I like to call it an IOS, an inner operating system update, just like we do with our phone.
Okay.
Anyway, so talk about the negotiation. I'm curious about that.
Well, you know, sometimes, so if I were to describe it as an entity, and what you know, I don't like to use, of course, sometimes, you know, I get clients who, you know, have all this demonic kind of narrative, right? You know, or I'm being invaded by demonic forces, or sorcery is being done on me. And so I prefer to sort of talk about these things in more neutral terms, like heavy energies, like entities, or I'll even talk about entities as like crystallized energies. They are the crystallized energies of certain heavy states, or the crystallized energies of certain protectors. All right. So sometimes what will happen is that I'm journeying to the lower world, and I will encounter one of these entities or protectors, and they'll appear to me in whatever form, like, you know, you know,
they want to be scary.
You cannot pass, you know, it's it's like, you know, the Lord of the Rings, what a great, you know, magical narrative about these kinds of things, you know, and they're very stubborn, right? Like, no, I'm not leaving. What do you mean? I'm not leaving. This, you know, Sarah needs me, right? And I'm like, okay, but here's the deal. All right. And I often will engage the client in this conversation with this part. I'll say, like, you know, Sarah, do you think that this protector is really serving you well anymore? And no. Okay. So let's see if we can convince this entity, this protector part of self, to, like, we're not trying to kill them, because often there's that defensive structure, like, you're trying to kill me off, right? What we want to do is we want to say, so, you know, Sarah is actually a grown-up now, would be one example, right? And she's got all these like gifts and strengths, and, you know, she's in a happy marriage or whatever it is, right? And we would like you to maybe for a moment step aside.
This is internal family systems. You should look into it. It's exactly what they do in IFS. So I just love it how the truth of how we can help people transform just reveals itself. It just comes in all these different,
isn't it? It's interesting.
Brilliant. It's so brilliant.
Yeah, and then the other option is I take this clear-cut Vogel crystal, and so sometimes in my shamanic training, we talk about how an entity will attach itself to the central channel, which is the energy cord that runs parallel to and inside the spinal column. And it will feed off of the energy of the central channel in the spine. And For instance, sometimes working with that entity or that protector in the lower world is not doing the trick. And then I go to where you go, Renee, which is like, okay, you know, it is just time for you to go. So I have the client stand up. I put this crystal, which is about yay long, it's double terminated, into their left hand, one point facing up the arm and the other point facing down. And I'm holding the crystal, you know, loose. So their hand is loosely around it. I'm holding it. And then I am heating the client's body up, because we say in our shamanic practice that entities of this nature, they cannot stand heat. So I bring the fire up from the earth. I get the client very heated up. And then I begin to say, come to the crystal. Here in the crystal is everything you're actually trying to get and look for. And you know what? This person, Sarah, is so sucked dry, she doesn't have anything left to give you. You're gonna die if you stay. Come to the crystal. So that, and then we do this process with deep breath work, and you know, the client is actually talking to the entity, thanking it for its protection, its lessons, or whatever, and then saying, it is time for you to go. And so then, you know, I'm shaking the hand with the crystal in it, and boom, it pops out into the crystal. It's very shamanic.
So the traditional, the modified shamanic version of negative energy extraction, I actually really like calling them defensive structures now, because
it's a great term. I agree with you.
My experience is that nothing lives in our psychic space without our permission on some level. And that's where people are particularly disempowered or are in a victim perspective, then things are perpetrated on them. And part of you know, our work is to help elevate people into personal empowerment, so that they realize, again, it's a spiritual law. Nothing can live in our psychic space without our permission. And so being so the traditional way that I work to expel, I actually, I don't negotiate with them. I'm very compassionate to entities, because they are at their own usually very low level of consciousness, feeding on mucus and feces and what, they're very low. They're feeding on sadness and suffering and trauma and like they'll often, anyway. So, and that could be seen actually as the way that we remain attached and actually get juice out of our own stuff that we get stuck in. Right. And so, similar to your crystal, the light is always available to us. And I have people call in a portal of light, and the entity needs to move into the portal of light. For its own evolution, because it's out of flow. It's a parasite now. And it's not, everything is in evolutionary flow. Ultimately, all things in their best behavior are submitting themselves or surrendering to the higher consciousness of the life force, right? So you need to do that now. And I have depossession guides that can help them to go. And often there's a lot of other help. And if not, I pull out my trusty bell.
Lots of sound.
Which moves them right along. For for their own evolution and highest good. Because just like we can get stuck in dysfunctional relationships and be afraid of something unfamiliar, disenergetic forms are afraid to move on to the next place.
Excuse me, sorry.
No, it's fine. So beautiful correlation of
parallel,
all the different ways that we can clear these old structures that don't serve us anymore.
I talk about the fact that there's an affinity in the psyche, and that affinity, you know, to attract, again, it's like you said, nothing comes in that there isn't some deep, often unconscious permission. And
I mean, they even come in through lifetimes, you know, things come in through at birth, it came in with us, it's been with us for,
or through, or it's passed on transgenerationally.
There's a lot of let's talk about the third floor of trauma. if we haven't
Oh,
already.
yeah, no, we haven't. So the third floor is somebody who has, they've really, there's been a lot of, you know, uh, the kind of work we're talking about. There's a great feeling of empowerment and actually excitement in the process, right? There still are aspects of the trauma that are operating in the system, but it's becoming much lighter, and they are beginning to understand that they're no longer in the victim place. They're beginning to see themselves as, this is a part of me, and it is an opportunity to grow personally. And they already have a lot of tools. A person already has a lot of tools that they can use for themselves, on themselves, when they feel like they're beginning to, I often call it the rabbit hole more than being triggered. They're beginning to, they can see when they're getting sucked energetically by the gravity of an old rabbit hole, going into a trauma spiral.
Yep.
And, they are able to identify it before they're deep down, or they're able to, like, just maybe they go down a little bit, and then they begin to see that they can use. And I was listening to your podcast this morning about how our feelings are actually good because they're giving us information. And so a client at this level has begun to develop a more positive relationship to heavy states, to being in the rabbit hole. And they're beginning also to be able to say, okay, I can allow myself to feel. And that process of feeling is actually then moving energy, as opposed to I'm stuck in the feeling.
Right. Yep.
Or I'm hijacked into the feeling.
Right.
And they're also beginning to connect the dots of their journey of healing, their trauma healing, to this spiritual, the spiritual journey. And they're beginning to see it. And Carl Jung talked about this as a stage. They're beginning to see it as more as a spiritual process and less as a psychological trauma-focused process, right?
It's the hero's journey.
It's the hero's
Joseph
journey.
Campbell.
Right.
Yes, that we all have a cave,
And
there's
they're
a
on the
dragon, and we got to go into the cave and
yeah.
get the jewels back from the dragon. Yeah.
Right. And I talk about this also as we're working at the archetypal level of their experience, right? And so again, the hero's journey. And that archetypal level, and this kind of goes up into the fourth level, is also beginning to develop the capacity to use their process in service of the healing of others, or the healing of humanity, or the healing of the earth. And that's where you begin to get into the fourth level, when
I love that.
it's the personal is transpersonal, and it is also collective, right? And that's where people in the third level, people are beginning to wake up to the fact that, oh, maybe I'm a healer, or there is some way that I want my healing journey, I want to share it with others, right? In service of others. And then at the fourth level, they're called to they're being called to the medicine. That's what I call it. That's what my spirit guide said to me. Your job is to call forth people who are called to harness their medicine offering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Me too. I have different wording. I call it the authentic self, that we're all part of a larger system. And just like a body, we're all little cells that have a role to play, whether we're a digestive cell or a bone cell or a skin cell. And that discovering, I mean, often the overculture has separated us from what those are, and some of the work on a soul level is to return like a little stem cell back into rediscover what our authentic role is. And we all have a role to play. And being able, whether that is being a healer, I mean, those are often the people that are drawn to me, whether they're directly healers or like the client I had this morning, who's a corporate manager in a international health or a national healthcare program, who mentors other people to evolve themselves and face their fears. Like there's a lot of different ways we bring our medicine into the world to help.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is like at the third level, that's also where I always think of it as like you're beginning to get more granular, right? Like, okay, before it was like for me in my experience, it was all I could do to just deal with, you know, the traumatic imprint from my mentally ill mother, an abusive mother. And then when you get to the third level, you're beginning to sort of, you're really like, you're feeling free of that, more or less, but then you're beginning to see how in these more subtle ways, you know, there are things operating, and you're working at the level of what is the deep belief that has been formed.
Right. Which could be also called a more karmic level, which is like, ooh, on some level, maybe I signed up for this. Because if I didn't have the crazy parents I had, I wouldn't be the excellent therapist that I am today.
Exactly.
Right? So in that way, I love the idea that we are all bodhisattvas on some level here. We're all volunteering for, not on a human level, on a personality level. No one wants to be raped or tortured or abused or neglected. But on a soul level, all of that is impermanent and comes and goes. And our opportunities for our spirit to grow and evolve through these experiences, and ultimately into helping others and stepping continually deeper into the unification of all things, of which we're proud. Beautiful. Oh, this is such a great conversation, Rachel.
I'm learning things from you.
We are both.
Which is always great.
It's so dynamic. So do you have any takeaways? I love to be able to offer people something to be able to do at home. You know, if I'm assuming people are interested or have their own, everybody has unresolved emotional issues. So what would you suggest for people as a takeaway to help them on their trauma healing journey?
Well, what I mentioned earlier, which is this beautiful practice of just visualizing yourself inside a clear quartz crystal. And you can actually get a physical crystal, you know, if you have one. Many people who come to me already have collected crystals and gemstones and rocks and things like that. Or you can go buy one. And so if you want to hold that crystal, and, you know, visualize the bottom of the crystal, the roots of the crystal going deep down underneath your feet into the crystalline matrix, the body of Mother Earth, and the tip of the crystal up above your head, like a vaulted temple ceiling. And there's plenty of space inside. And there's all this crystalline light. And so by doing this, the crystal is a protective energetic structure. The crystal, by its very nature, is beginning to transmute heavy energies and transmute them into light. And the crystal is also connecting you to the crystalline matrix of your highest self. And it's activating the natural crystals that we have in our physical body. So scientifically, it has been discovered, for instance, in the pineal gland, that there are these little seed crystals. And so when you visualize yourself in the crystal, it is activating that higher consciousness. And it's a beautiful practice to do. Like if you feel like you're going, like let's say you're going home for Thanksgiving into a somewhat toxic family environment, visualize yourself in this crystal before you go.
Beautiful.
Or wake up in the morning and visualize yourself in the crystal. You know,
that's before a beautiful spiritual, very practical spiritual practice.
Very practical.
Awesome.
Okay.
So do you have any, all my links for my mentorship program for working with me individually are in my show notes, and Rachel, Dr. Rachel Mann's will be in ours as well. And so do you have anything you want to mention for people to look for, or how they can work with you verbally right now?
Yeah, sure. So my website is rachelmannphd.com. And there are links there to shamanic healing, so you can actually read about what a shamanic healing looks like. I also have a YouTube channel that is linked under about and media, and there's lots of videos there where you can hear about what an energy healing session, how it goes, how it's structured. I also have a podcast, and that's also where you can see my mentoring program. And I'm beginning to, after I took a sabbatical off of teaching shamanism and shamanic energy medicine, what I call Awakened Heart Shamanism. And I'm going to be this year offering my deep intensive shamanic training again, starting in the spring. And so stay tuned for that when you tune in. And you can also find a contact page and contact me through my website. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yes.
Rachel, fabulous to connect
Great,
with
Renee.
you.
Wonderful conversation. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
And blessings on the beautiful work that you do in the world. And maybe we'll have another conversation again in the future.
I think so. So,
all right.
be well.
Blessings.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.